Evening, sir. I stopped you for swerving back there. Have you had anything to drink tonight?
I had a couple at dinner.
You know who you're talking to?
And it doesn't change the stop.
License, registration.
I'm Judge Franklin.
You write me up, your chief's going to be explaining why you're unemployed.
He smiled like the rules were written for everyone else until the handcuffs clicked. If you're new here, hit subscribe and tap like, because this case starts as a routine DUI stop and ends with a judge losing everything. Officer Mason Reed worked nights in Cedar Grove, Ohio. 32, close-cropped blonde hair, steady voice, the kind of cop who didn't escalate unless someone forced it. His bodycam caught a dark sedan weaving along Route 9, drifting over the shoulder line, correcting late. He lit it up. The sedan delayed, then pulled over beneath a flickering street lamp. The driver was a black man in his late 40s with a neat salt and pepper beard, tailored navy suit, tie loosened. His eyes were glassy. His confidence wasn't. "Evening, sir," Mason said. "Reason for the stop: lane control." "License and registration." The window lowered halfway. Alcohol hit like a punch. "You know who I am?" the man asked. "Not yet," Mason said. The license read Hun, Damon Whitaker. The photo matched. Mason kept his face blank. "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" Whitaker scoffed. "I'm a judge. You don't talk to me like I'm some drunk off the street." "It's a simple question," Mason said. Whitaker leaned toward the opening. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk back to that car and forget this, or you'll be writing parking tickets in the snow for the rest of your career. Power, not fists." Mason felt his jaw set. "Step out of the vehicle." Whitaker laughed. "The chief plays golf with me. The county commissioner calls me judge like it's scripture. You want to make enemies tonight?" Mason's voice sharpened. "Sir, exit the vehicle now." Hands visible. For a second, Whitaker didn't move, as if refusal could rewrite reality. Then he opened the door and stood tall, solid, suit creased, expensive shoes planted like he owned the shoulder. Up close, the smell was worse. He swayed, corrected, and sneered. "Careful, you're about to make a stupid mistake." "Hands on the hood," Mason said. Whitaker angled his face toward the bodycam. "This officer is harassing me." "Unlawful stop." Mason ran the sobriety test. Whitaker failed it in small, undeniable ways, missed steps, talked over instructions, blinked too long. When Mason produced the breathalyzer, Whitaker refused. "I'm not blowing into anything," he said. "I am the court." "Then you're refusing," Mason said. "That's your choice." Whitaker's smile returned. "My choice is one call, and you'll be explaining yourself." Mason turned him, controlled the arms, and the cuffs closed with a clean metallic snap. Whitaker's smug expression flickered, just a beat of disbelief. "You're arresting a judge," Whitaker said, voice dropping colder. "Do you understand what you've done?" Mason held eye contact. "I'm arresting a driver." For DUI, in the back seat, Whitaker tested the cuffs, anger rising. "This won't stand. I'll have you suspended by morning." Mason shut the door and radioed dispatch, tone steady. He just crossed a line powerful people expected to be invisible, and Damon Whitaker didn't see an arrest as the start of justice. He saw it as the start of war. As he pulled onto the road behind the cruiser, the Axon overlay kept recording, rec blinking, timestamp ticking, capturing every word Whitaker spat, every calm instruction Mason repeated. That footage would become the one thing no phone call could erase. By sunrise, Damon Whitaker had already made it clear he didn't believe in consequences. If you want the full arc of how power fights back and how it finally loses, subscribe and hit like, because the next moves happen fast. At the Cedar Grove station, Whitaker's suit looked more rumpled under fluorescent lights, but his posture stayed arrogant. He kept repeating one line like it was a magic spell: "Call your supervisor." Mason Reed did. Sergeant Leela Park, 40, Korean-American, hair in a tight bun, walked into booking with a face that said she'd seen this movie before. Whitaker straightened when he saw her. "Good, someone competent." "This officer is out of line." Leela didn't glance at his watch or his expensive shoes. She glanced at the bodycam doc. "We'll review everything," she said. "Sit still." Whitaker's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Leela said. "And you're going through booking like everyone else." That was when Whitaker changed tactics. He stopped threatening and started bargaining. He offered a quiet resolution. He mentioned donations, endorsements, favors. When that didn't land, he pivoted back to fear. "This is a career-ending mistake," he told Mason through the bars. "Internal affairs will crawl through your life, your mortgage, your wife, your mistakes. I'll make sure of it." Mason didn't answer. He was thinking about procedure: refusal logged, field test documented, station cameras synced, chain of custody clean. He'd learned early that you don't beat influence with emotion. You beat it with paperwork. Whitaker got his phone call. He didn't call family. He called a name Mason recognized from local headlines: Attorney Nolan Briggs, the kind of defense lawyer who advertised with billboards and political friendships. Within an hour, Briggs arrived in a charcoal coat, slick hair, confident smile. He spoke to Whitaker in a low voice, then stepped into the hallway and made 3 calls without leaving the building. When he returned, he looked at Mason like he was appraising an employee. Officer Reed, Briggs said, polite. My client is a sitting judge. You understand how sensitive this is. OVI is sensitive, Mason said. So is letting it slide. Briggs' smile tightened. We'll see. By noon, the pressure started. The chief's office asked Mason to write a supplemental, then another, then another. A city council member called the station just to check on things. A local blogger posted that the stop was targeted. Comments flooded in, splitting into tribes within minutes. Whitaker leaned into it. From the holding area, he told Briggs, loud enough for the camera, "This officer singled me out." Mason knew what that was, planting a narrative before facts could land, but the facts already existed. The Axon file sat on a secure server with a checksum and an upload time that didn't care about anyone's last name. At arraignment the next morning, Whitaker walked in wearing a new suit and a look of offended royalty. He expected the courtroom to bow. Instead, the presiding judge, an older woman named Judith Arlen, took one look at the conflict of interest memo and recused herself on the record. You will not shop for leniency in my courtroom, she said flatly. Whitaker's nostrils flared. For the first time, his control slipped. And outside the courthouse, a news van pulled up, cameras rolling, because Cedar Grove had just realized this wasn't a private problem anymore. The story hit the evening news like a match to dry grass. Subscribe and hit like if you want stories where the system actually gets stress-tested, because this is where the cover-up attempt begins. By day 2, Judge Arrested crawled across screens across Ohio. Damon Whitaker sat in a studio interview arranged by Briggs before the ink was dry, speaking with calm outrage. He called it an abuse of discretion. He hinted at racial profiling without saying the words outright, letting the audience fill in the blanks. He wore the robe in people's minds, even in a suit. Behind him, supporters gathered on the courthouse steps. Some were true believers, some were political friends protecting an investment. Signs appeared, respect the bench, stop police overreach. The loudest voices weren't asking what happened, they were deciding what had to be true. Mason Reed watched none of it. He was on duty, doing what he always did, except now every stop felt like it had an invisible audience. His name leaked online after a council aide accidentally forwarded an email chain. A photo of Mason and his fiancée, Erin Walsh, ended up on a forum with their address blurred badly enough to be useless. Sergeant Leela Park moved fast. Patrol units drove past Mason's apartment twice a night. The department's IT locked down his profiles. Internal Affairs opened a standard review, and Mason welcomed it. Reviews were slow, but they were factual. Facts were his only ally. The IA investigator, Captain René Soto, interviewed Mason for 2 hours. Mid-50s, Puerto Rican, voice like sandpaper. Soto didn't care about politics. He cared about timelines. Why did you stop him? Soto asked. Lane drift, delayed pullover, strong odor, poor performance on tests, Mason said. Soto tapped the table. Any prior knowledge of his identity? No, Soto nodded once. Good, because he's telling anyone who will listen that you recognized him and went hunting. Mason let the silence sit. The video shows the truth, he said. It does, Soto replied, and that's why they're trying to make this about anything but the video. Briggs filed motions immediately, suppress the stop, challenge the tests, argue bias. Then came the real play. Briggs requested the case be transferred, insisted every local judge was tainted, and quietly floated a deal to the county prosecutor's office. Plead to a non-criminal traffic infraction, no admission, no press. Assistant prosecutor Dana Keene refused. 37, bob haircut, wireframe glasses, a reputation for not blinking. If he were a plumber, we'd charge him, she told her boss. If he were a judge, we charge him carefully. That was the next counterattack. A donor pulled support from the prosecutor's re-election fund. 2 commissioners called Keene reckless. A courthouse clerk found her parking ticketed every day for a week. Petty pressure, constant pressure. Then the Ohio Judicial Commission stepped in. They issued a formal notice. Whitaker was under investigation for conduct unbecoming and misuse of office. That single piece of letterhead did what no opinion segment could, made it official that the robe didn't protect him. Whitaker reacted like a man insulted by gravity. They're humiliating me, he told Briggs. I want this stopped. Briggs' voice stayed smooth. Then we shift the target. That night, Mason got a voicemail with no number attached. A man's voice, low and amused. Back off, Officer Reed, you're in over your head. Mason deleted it, documented it, forwarded it to Soto. He didn't tell Erin until morning because he didn't want fear running his home. But fear was exactly what Whitaker was counting on. And in a city where everyone knew everyone, the next move would be made in whispers, not court filings. Whitaker didn't fight the charge like a defendant. He fought it like a man used to bending the board. Subscribe and hit like, because this part shows the pivot from legal defense to dirty leverage, and the moment it backfires. On the surface, his case moved the way high-profile cases always do. motions, continuances, polite arguments about procedure. Behind the surface, Cedar Grove started hearing strange little stories about Mason Reed. A rumor that he had a temper, another that he targeted nice cars. None of it came with names, just repetition. Then Erin Walsh got called into her office at the community college. Her supervisor looked uncomfortable. "A complaint came in," she said. "Anonymous. It says you and your fiancé have been aggressive online." Erin stared. "I don't even post." That evening, Mason filed a report. Captain Soto's eyes hardened. "They're trying to isolate you," he said. "Make your life loud enough that you'll crave quiet." Mason didn't crave quiet. He craved a clean case file. 2 nights later, after shift, Mason stepped into a 24-hour diner off Route 9. It was empty except for a cook wiping down counters and a man in a brown jacket sitting in the corner booth like he'd been waiting. Mid-30s, thin, haircut too neat. He raised a hand. "Officer Reed," the man said. "Mind if I talk to you?" Mason's instincts tightened. "Who are you?" "Name's Caleb Hins," he said, smiling like a salesman. "I represent people who value discretion." Mason didn't sit. "Say what you need to say." Hins slid a business card across the table. No logo, just a number. "This whole thing is turning into a mess," he said. "You're in the middle of it. That's not fair. Sometimes the right move is to let the system handle it without extra noise." Mason heard the shape of the offer before it fully formed. "Extra noise like bodycam footage," Hins chuckled softly. "Files get corrupted, uploads fail." "Things happen," Mason's voice stayed flat. "Are you asking me to tamper with evidence?" Hins lifted both hands, innocent theater. "I'm saying there are people who'd appreciate a little humanity. And they appreciate it materially." Mason stepped back. "Get up." Hins blinked. "Excuse me." "Stand up," Mason said louder. "Hands where I can see them." The cook froze. Hins' smile collapsed into irritation. "You're overreacting." Mason showed his badge, then his cuffs. "You're offering a bribe to an officer connected to an active case." Hins' eyes darted to the door. He didn't run. He tried to negotiate. "Look, man, this is above me. I'm delivering a message." "Good," Mason said. "You can deliver it to IA." Captain Soto arrived with another unit within minutes. They pulled Hins' phone. There were texts, coded but clear, pointing toward Briggs' office. Not proof of Whitaker's direct involvement yet, but it was enough to turn pressure into a criminal lane. The next day, the prosecutor amended the filing. Attempted bribery, obstruction concerns, request for protective orders. The court granted them. The headlines changed tone. "Judge's case expands," one anchor said, eyes wide like she couldn't believe the plot. Whitaker watched it from his house in Brookhaven Heights, blinds half-drawn, whiskey replaced by espresso and rage. He called Briggs and hissed, "Fix it." Briggs' voice was calm but thinner. "Your people need to stop freelancing." Whitaker didn't hear the warning inside that sentence. He heard only one thing: the war was getting expensive. And when expensive wars start slipping, powerful men don't retreat. They escalate. By the time the special prosecutor arrived, Damon Whitaker's arrogance had turned into strategy. Subscribe and hit like, because this is the phase where the machine tries to protect itself, and one stubborn cop keeps the gears from slipping. The Attorney General's office assigned Special Prosecutor Mariah Stanton to avoid local entanglements. Stanton came from Cincinnati, early 40s, black, sharp cheekbones, eyes that read a room in seconds. She walked into Cedar Grove with a single message: no favors, no shortcuts, no quiet deals. Whitaker's camp hated her instantly. Briggs tried to frame it as political theater. "They're making an example out of my client," he told anyone with a microphone. Stanton didn't debate on TV. She filed. First, she locked down the digital evidence. Bodycam, dispatch audio, cruiser GPS, station video, breath refusal logs. Then she subpoenaed Whitaker's phone records. Then she pulled courthouse access logs. Whitaker had spent years believing the system was soft clay. Stanton treated it like steel. The Judicial Commission issued an emergency suspension pending outcome. That was when Whitaker finally understood something was slipping out of his hands, not his freedom yet, his identity. In Cedar Grove, Judge Whitaker became Damon Whitaker, just a man with a mugshot and a case number. He fought back with optics. A community meeting appeared overnight at a local church. Whitaker stood at the pulpit, suit crisp, voice controlled, speaking about respect and dignity. He never said DUI, he said attack. He never said bribe, he said misunderstanding. Supporters clapped because clapping felt like loyalty. Outside, Mason Reed stood with another officer to keep the peace. He didn't engage, he watched. When Whitaker's eyes met his, Whitaker smiled like he still had a lever left to pull. At the pretrial hearing, that smile finally cracked. Special Prosecutor Stanton played the footage in court, not for drama, for record. The room heard Whitaker's words, the career threats, the "I am the court," the refusal, the slurred confidence. Then came the diner incident, Hins' recorded offer, his texts, the phrase, "Client wants this quiet." Briggs objected. Stanton responded with timestamps and authentication. Judge Pro Tem Leonard Klein, brought in from a neighboring county, overruled, irritated that anyone assumed his robe was flexible. "Mr. Briggs," Klein said, "the court is not your client's private office." Whitaker leaned toward his lawyer, jaw tight. "This is a hit job," he muttered. Stanton didn't look at him. She looked at the judge. "We are prepared to add witness intimidation if we confirm the anonymous complaints were coordinated," she said. That was the moment the gallery shifted. People stopped seeing a powerful man targeted. They started seeing a powerful man panicking. After the hearing, Hines asked to speak with prosecutors. He wanted a deal. He didn't name Whitaker directly, not yet. But he did name someone else, Whitaker's longtime aide, a fixer named Russell Vane, the one who handled problems for the judge. Stanton wrote the name down without expression. "We'll verify," she said. Mason drove home that night under a sky that looked too normal for the week he'd lived. Erin met him at the door, eyes tired but steady. "Do you think they'll actually hold him?" she asked. Mason exhaled. "They have to. If they don't, none of this means anything." And somewhere in Brookhaven Heights, Damon Whitaker stared at a calendar full of hearings and realized the one tool he'd always trusted, connections, was turning into a paper trail. The trial didn't start with fireworks. It started with a clerk calling a name that no longer carried magic. Subscribe and hit like, because this is where Damon Whitaker finally walks into a courtroom and discovers it doesn't belong to him. Jury selection took 2 days. 12 jurors sat, ordinary faces, ordinary jobs, the kind of people Whitaker had sentenced with a shrug. Whitaker arrived each morning in a dark suit, escorted like any defendant, chin high as if posture could rewrite evidence. Inside, the case was simple in structure and heavy in meaning. Officer Mason Reed testified first. Special Prosecutor Stanton kept it clean. Why the stop happened, what he observed, what Whitaker said, what Whitaker did. Mason didn't dramatize, he described. Briggs tried to provoke him. "You raised your voice." "Yes," Mason said, "when he refused lawful commands. You wanted to make a point." Mason looked straight ahead. "I wanted him not to kill someone on the road." Then the video played. The court watched Whitaker perform his own downfall, career threats, "I am the court," refusal, the smug certainty that a phone call could erase a badge. Station footage and dispatch logs backed it up. Erin testified about the anonymous complaint at her job, the way pressure suddenly found their home. The pivot was Russell Vane, Whitaker's fixer. Vane took the stand under a cooperation deal. He admitted he arranged the diner approach through Caleb Hines. He admitted he drafted anonymous tips and fed them to a blogger. When Stanton asked who ordered it, he hesitated, then said it anyway. Judge Whitaker did. Whitaker's head snapped toward him, eyes hard. The courtroom saw the man behind the robe, not dignified, furious. Briggs called a few character witnesses. Stanton didn't attack them. She returned to the central fact. Whitaker treated public trust like a shield. Whitaker insisted on testifying. On the stand, he spoke smoothly about being misunderstood. Stanton asked softly, then played clips that contradicted him: refusal before counsel, threats before any confusion. Whitaker blinked, then snapped. "I believed discretion would be used," he said, "because that's how the real world works." The judge cut in. "Answer the question. Do you deny saying it?" Whitaker's jaw tightened. "No." Closings were short. Stanton ended with one line. "If the law bends for power, it breaks for everyone else." The jury asked to see the bodycam again. They returned before sunset. "Guilty." Whitaker didn't crumble. He tightened, like a man being forced into a shape he hated. He leaned toward Briggs and whispered, "Fix it." But the verdict wasn't a negotiation. Sentencing was next. The judge ordered Whitaker's passport surrendered and his bond reviewed on the spot. The gallery murmured when the court read the counts aloud. Operating while impaired, refusal consequences, misuse of office, attempted obstruction tied to the diner approach. Whitaker's supporters outside still chanted, but their voices sounded distant in the courtroom, like noise from another life. Mason sat in the back row, hands clasped, feeling nothing like victory. Just a steady, heavy relief, because the hardest part was never the arrest, it was surviving everything that came after it. Erin squeezed his hand once, a silent reminder that doing the right thing had a cost, and they'd paid it. Whitaker showed up for sentencing expecting one last back-channel miracle. Subscribe and hit like, because the final outcome proves something rare. Sometimes the system does exactly what it's supposed to do. The courtroom was quieter than trial days. No cameras inside, but the hallway outside buzzed with reporters. Damon Whitaker sat at the defense table in a gray suit, shoulders rigid, eyes scanning the room like he was still looking for someone powerful enough to stop the clock. Briggs leaned in and whispered options. Whitaker barely listened. He'd lived too long believing there was always an option. Special Prosecutor Mariah Stanton stood and asked for accountability without theatrics. A sentence that matched the conduct, a record that couldn't be rewritten, and conditions that protected the public. She spoke about trust, how a judge doesn't just break a law, he breaks the belief that law applies. Briggs argued for leniency. A single bad night, he said. A lifetime of service, public humiliation. My client has already suffered. Judge Pro Tem Leonard Klein didn't look impressed. Suffering is not a substitute for responsibility, he said. Then he turned to Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker, you may speak. Whitaker stood. For a moment he tried humility, the words coming out like they'd been translated from a language he didn't respect. He mentioned stress, he mentioned community work. He never said the simplest thing the court wanted to hear: I was wrong. When Klein asked directly if he accepted the verdict, Whitaker's mask cracked again. I accept that I lost, he said, bitterness sharp. I don't accept that this was justice. The room stayed still. Klein nodded slowly, like that answer confirmed everything. The sentence came down in plain language, the kind that didn't care about titles. Conviction entered. Driver's license suspended under state rules. Mandatory alcohol assessment and treatment. Community service with reporting requirements. A period of incarceration consistent with guidelines for the offense and the added obstruction conduct, short enough to be fair, long enough to sting. No special accommodations. No time served magic and a standing order, no contact with Officer Reed or his family. But the real punishment arrived in the paperwork that followed. Within weeks, the Judicial Commission finalized removal from the bench. Whitaker's gavel, his chambers, his staff, all gone. The state bar opened proceedings based on the conviction and conduct. His license to practice law was suspended pending final disposition. The political friends who once answered his calls stopped picking up. The church meetings stopped. The signs disappeared. Loyalty has a short shelf life when it stops being useful. On a January morning, Mason Reed drove past the county courthouse on his way to shift. He didn't feel triumph. He felt something steadier, closure. Not the kind you celebrate, the kind that lets you breathe again. Aaron asked him later over dinner, would you do it again, knowing what they tried to do to us? Mason didn't hesitate. Yes, he said, because if I didn't, I'd be teaching the next guy that power wins. Somewhere in a jail intake line, Damon Whitaker finally stood shoulder to shoulder with men who didn't care about his resume. For the first time in his adult life, he had nothing to threaten anyone with. No robe, no network, just a number and a record. And Cedar Grove learned a quiet lesson. Justice isn't loud when it's real. It's documented, it's verified. It's final. If you made it to the end, hit like and subscribe for more true-to-life stories. And tell me in the comments, do you think powerful people should face harsher consequences because they knew better, or the same consequences as everyone else?